I am building a binary classification model using Sklearn's Gaussian process classifier. I want to predict class probabilities for new data. The quiz asks which statements about getting class probabilities from this classifier are true. To get class probabilities, I need to set the probability parameter to true when I create the Gaussian process classifier. Otherwise, the model won't calculate probabilities. Google style name lively, it's like flipping a switch. Google style. No, the predict method only gives the predicted class labels 0 or 1. Not the probabilities. It's a final decision, not a probability estimation. The predictProba method gives class probabilities. Break time 300 milliseconds, but only if I set probability true earlier. Google style name excited, it's the key to unlocking probability information. Google style. Although a Gaussian process model deals with uncertainty, it doesn't automatically give probabilities without the probability true setting and using predictProba. Break time 300 milliseconds, it needs that extra step to calculate and display probabilities explicitly. To solve this, I only need to understand how the Gaussian process classifier works in Sklearn. No complicated calculations needed. Break time 200 ms. It's all about knowing the library's functions. I need to recall that the probability parameter controls probability calculations. Break time 200 milliseconds, and that predict gives the predicted classes while predictProba gives their probabilities. Google style name conversational simple. Right? Google style. I'll explain this. Google style name conversational to get class probabilities from a Gaussian process classifier. You must set the probability parameter to true when you create the model. Think of it like this: you are giving the model permission to calculate those probabilities. Break time 500 milliseconds. Without this setting, the model simply won't do the extra work needed to generate them. Break time 300 ms. Google style break time 300 milliseconds. The probability true acts as a switch to turn on this probability calculating feature. This refers to the step where you set up the Gaussian process classifier model. This is where you specify settings, including whether you want probability calculation enabled using the probability true parameter. After initializing the model, you want to predict probabilities or classes. Right? Google style name excited. This is where you apply your trained model to new data. Google style. This is the Sklearn function specifically designed to get the class probabilities. Google style name helpful. It's like asking your model, hey, what are the chances this new data point belongs to each class? Google style. It gives you an array of probabilities for each class. These are the numbers between 0 and 1 that the predictProba function outputs. They represent the model's confidence that a new data point belongs to a particular class. Google style num enthusiastic. For example, a probability of 0.8 for class 1 means the model is 80 sure that the data point belongs to class 1. Google style. I'll explain model initialization in the context of a Google style name assertive Gaussian process classifier. Google style. You must set the probability parameter to true when you create your model. Think of it like flipping a switch. It turns on the model's ability to calculate probabilities. Without this, the model can only give you the most likely class label, not the probability of that prediction being correct. This is the crucial part for getting class probabilities from a Gaussian process classifier. By setting probability true, I tell the model to do the extra work necessary to calculate probabilities during prediction. Google style name excited. It's like giving the model a superpower. Google style. It allows the model to not only predict the class but also give a confidence score for the prediction. This is the method you call after setting probability true in your model. It's the method that actually gives you those coveted class probabilities. The results are often represented in an array. For example, with two classes, you get an array where each row is a data point and has two columns, the probability of belonging to class 0 and the probability of belonging to class 1. These are the output of predict proba. Google style name friendly, they aren't just guesses. Google style, they're quantitative estimates of a likelihood that a data point belongs to each class. They range from 0 to 1. And for a given data point, the probabilities across all classes add up to 1. These probabilities are useful for making more informed decisions based on your model's predictions. And to get a better understanding of your model's uncertainty, I'll explain this key point. Google style name conversational, the say is interpret as characters Gaussian process classifiers a as in. Scikit-learn doesn't automatically calculate probabilities. You must explicitly tell it to do so by setting the probability parameter to true when you create the classifier object. Think of it like turning on a switch. Without it, the probability feature remains off. And you can't get probability estimates from say as. Interpret as characters predict proba say as. Google style break time 300 milliseconds only, then will say as. Interpret as characters predict proba say is give you class probabilities. These are numbers between 0 and 1 that represent the model's confidence that a data point belongs to each class. For a binary classification problem, you'll get two probabilities: the probability of belonging to class 0 and the probability of belonging to class 1. The sum of these probabilities will always be 1. This is the scikit-learn method that actually provides the class probabilities. But only after I set probability true. Google style name excited, it's the tool you use to get those crucial numbers. Google style break time 300 milliseconds. This is a type of machine learning model that uses Gaussian processes to perform classification tasks. It can predict the class labels of new data points based on the data it was trained on. Break time 300 milliseconds was specifically interested in how it handles probabilities. This is a parameter in the say is interpret as characters Gaussian process classifiers a as constructor. Setting it to true enables probability calculations within the model, making the predict proba method work. I can think of it as a necessary prerequisite for accessing probability estimates. This question is asking you to identify the correct way of obtaining class probabilities when using a say is interpret as characters Gaussian process classifiers a as in scikit-learn. This is partially true. Google style name conversational, the method say is interpret as characters predict proba say as is the right method to use, but only if I set the probability true parameter. Google style break time 300 milliseconds. This is false. Say is interpret as characters predict say is only gives the predicted class labels 0 or 1, not the probabilities associated with those predictions. This is completely true. It emphasizes the necessity of setting this parameter for correct probability estimation. This is false. Google style name emphatic, while the model deals with uncertainty, you still need to explicitly request probability calculations by setting probability true in using say is interpret as characters predict proba say as. Google style break time 300 milliseconds. This is the overall theme of the quiz, focusing on how to obtain probability estimates using the say as. Interpret as characters Gaussian process classifiers a as. I am asking you this question to test your understanding of how to get probability estimates from a Gaussian process classifier in scikit-learn. It's all about knowing which methods and parameters to use. You can only get class probabilities if you set the probability parameter to true when you create the Gaussian process classifier model. Think of it like this: probability true flips a switch that turns on the probability calculation feature. Without it, the model doesn't calculate probabilities. This method is the key to getting the probability estimates. This is what you call after training to get the actual probabilities. But only if you flipped the probability switch as explained in point 7. Google style name lively correct. Google style break time 300 milliseconds. The predict proba method gives you the class probabilities directly, but only if you've set probability true as described above. So this answer is conditionally true. It's a function call that gives your results. This parameter, set during the creation of the Gaussian process classifier model, is essential for enabling the model to calculate and provide probability estimates. It activates the probability calculation process. Google style name enthusiastic. Think of it like adding a crucial ingredient to your recipe. Google style. These are the outputs from predict proba. They represent the model's confidence in assigning a data point to each class, e.g. 80 probability of class 1. 20 probability of class 0. I see. You are asking about getting class probabilities from a Gaussian process classifier in Sklearn. Let me explain. You say is interpret as characters must say is set the probability parameter to true when you create the classifier. Think of it like flipping a switch. You have to activate this switch to get probability estimates. Without this, the model won't calculate them. It's a necessary condition, not optional. This parameter Google style name assertive is Google style crucial. When you set it to true during model creation, you are telling the model that you want it to calculate class probabilities. This means the classifier will perform the calculations needed for probability estimates in a later stage. Okay. So you've set probability true. This activates the predict proba method. This method then gives you the actual probabilities for each class. It's the only way to directly access these probabilities. So remember, you need that initial step to make this possible. These are the numbers you get from predict proba. They tell you, for each data point, the chance of belonging to each class, the probability of class 0 or the probability of class 1. If it's binary classification, like 0.770 probability for class 1 and 0.330 probability for class 0. Yes, the predict proba method directly outputs the class probabilities, but only if you set probability true during the initial model creation. It's important to remember this. It's the correct way to access them. This fact is true, but only under the condition that you set the probability true flag. I am asking you which statements are true about getting class probabilities from a Gaussian process classifier, a type of machine learning model. Break time 300 milliseconds. It's a multiple choice question. I am setting a parameter called probability equal to true. Break time 200 milliseconds. This is crucial. Break time 200 milliseconds. It tells the Gaussian process classifier to calculate and provide probability estimates. It's like giving a machine learning model the superpower to provide not just a single prediction but also a confidence level. Without this, the model's only capable of making hard predictions, like a flip of a coin. This method is what I call upon for obtaining probability estimates from the model after I've enabled probability calculation using probability true. Break time 300 milliseconds. It's the essential method for obtaining class probabilities. Think of it as asking, hey model, what are the chances of each class? Break time 300 milliseconds. This function returns probabilities for all classes. It's like getting a breakdown of the likelihood of an event. Here's the core question I have in mind. Break time 200 milliseconds. We're digging into the details of a machine learning model. And I want to know what statements are accurate regarding the probability estimation process. This statement is true. Break time 200 milliseconds to obtain probability estimates. I must explicitly activate probability calculation during model initialization using probability true. Break time 300 milliseconds. It's a prerequisite. Break time 200 milliseconds. You can't get probabilities unless I've set this flag beforehand. It's a critical step. This is false. Break time 200 milliseconds. Although Gaussian processes inherently deal with uncertainty, you'll still need to explicitly enable probability calculations with the probability true flag during initialization and then use the predict_proba method. Break time 300 ms. It is a common misconception that probability is automatically calculated. This is incorrect. This is a title describing the central topic: how we deal with probability using the Gaussian process classifier, a type of machine learning model that we can use to predict probabilities. The title indicates that the main focus is on how probabilities are handled within the Gaussian process classifier, a machine learning model. So we can build predictive models that provide not just a result but also tell us how confident they are in that result.